You know what time it is. It's 9 to 5 with Gavin and Mike. In this episode, we'll be joined by a guest coach and we'll be sharing tips for avoiding burnout, plus things you can do if or when you start to feel burnout. But before we do that, drop the intro.
Konnichiwa. My name is Gavin Masamiya.
Nice to see ya.
I'm a mindset coach based out of West LA.
And I'm Mike Ahiri.
You hear me?
I'm a transformation life coach from London.
These recordings are short, sharp, sweet snippets of insight for anybody hustling a 9 to 5.
That's right, you can tune into them on your way to work, on your lunch break, or on your way home after a long day's hustle. I'm the type of person that kind of like goes, right? I'm like an all or nothing guy. And something I struggle with is burnout. And today in this deep dive, we're going to be talking about it. So without further ado, let me get the 20-minute timer started and we'll get the perspective of Gavin and our guest who will introduce to you in a moment. So 20 minutes deep dive starting from now.
Burnout, I mean, just from experience, it is something that I've definitely have faced with. And it comes with a lot of lethargy. And, when I would face it the most actually there was a place where I would bust my ass pretty much in activities that didn't actually bring that much meaning for me. And so I definitely have encountered times of being burnt out, doing things that I do enjoy. Like my biggest times of burnout was when I burned myself to the floor and my heart wasn't fully into it as well. And so I think there is something to be said that I have more endurance. I can still burn out, but I have a lot more endurance when I'm really interested and passionate and bring a lot of meaning into the things that I do. But yeah, so
that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so doing stuff that you're passionate about lets you go on for longer, but you still experience that burnout if you're not sort of aware of. Yeah, okay. We should probably introduce our guest. Who have we got sitting right next to you there, Gavin?
We got Umang right here. We just had an amazing retreat this weekend. So Umang, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from?
Yeah, so I'm Umang Dave, originally from San Francisco. I am being bi-coastal at the moment, San Francisco, Atlanta, and here I am, LA. We just ran a mindful masculinity workshop. The way we met was through a mutual friend. We both wanted to talk a lot about, what we see in the world for masculinity and femininity. And the world really has a lot of judgment about being a man and a woman in the world, as well as the energy of masculine and feminine. They relate to being a man and a woman. So I am a relationships coach and I focus on intimacy, sexuality, emotional intelligence, communication. And my journey has basically been, started with burnout, basically. Yeah, I was a management consultant. I was earning a 6-figure salary. I was traveling Monday. I was staying in a hotel bed 4 days a week and in my home for 3 days a week and working all day. And we would skip dinner or lunch, like eating while we're doing it. It was just so deflating because it just felt like there was no sense of replenishment, no sense of like fulfillment within me. And so I would come not full, not filled, and empty into my work. And it was not my passion. And I didn't see the impact of my work the way that I wanted to. And so that leads me to do a lot of work on myself. Now I am helping others who are stuck in a burnout lifestyle, especially in the tech world in San Francisco, men and women. And the key, and we can talk about this more, but from my perspective with masculine and feminine, is to get in touch with your feminine side. That is the fuel that allows the car to move forward. So your car, you could be a Lamborghini, right? And you have a lot of horsepower, but if you run out of fuel, then you're just a box taking up space and you just don't have the energy. And so I help people balance those energies within their work, especially when the corporate world is so masculine.
Well, this is so synchronistic, and thank you for joining us today, because you've just told us that you're someone who's come from that corporate world, right? 9 to 5. And what Gavin and I do in this channel, 9 to 5 with Gavin and Mike, is we appeal to a lot of people who are in 9 to 5 jobs, right? Working corporate jobs. And as you've just told us, you can experience burnout. And And I was going to ask you what the implications of that burnout was. Well, you said that you're going into work sort of not filled. You weren't sure of what your impact was in the world and how you were contributing. And then you talked about a solution, which is to get in touch with the feminine. So for some of our viewers who might not really understand what that means,
Right.
how can you expel what that means in a very pragmatic and practical way that some of our viewers and listeners can understand?
Yeah, and this beautiful and relates again to our corporate mentality, right? Which is that we stay up late a lot as a society. So if you only never slept, the consequence is not going to be good, because whenever you're awake, you will be unproductive, you will be moody, you'll be irritable, you will be depressed, you'll be anxious. You won't be able to feel good. And similarly, the feminine side is that of rejuvenation, of self-care, of feeling, of softening, of receiving. And that is where the power then comes. So when you have a really great night of sleep, then you can be very productive throughout the day. And it's not something that you just do once in a while just because you have to. You have to be consistently focused on rejuvenation so that you never get to that place where you're empty and then having to still keep going.
Totally. And that's so powerful. So being consistent with that rejuvenation and that rest, I think that's really some practical advice, something that I can take on for myself, because I was just telling Gavin before we started this recording that I'm the type of person that will just go, and then suddenly realize I need the rest.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ways that sort of come back and bitten me in the arse was when I used to, I moved from one job to the next. And during that sort of transition, I was sort of working to the point where I said, man, I just need a break. I literally said that. And when I got into my new line of work, I literally had a break in the form of breaking my ankle, right? Now, those two things might seem unrelated, but I kind of feel like I attracted that reality to myself. Literally broke my ankle. I was out of action for like 2-3 months on crutches, waiting for my ankle to heal. I literally had a break. And I think doing that consistent practice of, as you say, getting in touch with the feminine, self-care, rejuvenation on a consistent and regular basis would help. And I just want to bring Gavin into this and just ask you, Gavin, like, what are some of your experiences with burnout and how have you dealt with them?
Yeah, I would say that when it comes to burnout, I didn't have set clear boundaries, on when I'm going to actually stop working or when I'm going to stop focusing on a client back then, because I was working with kids back then. This is where I had the most burnout. And there's a lot of repetition when you're working in the field of ABA and social services, of these kids that you have to keep repeating different types of behaviors and interventions for them to eventually catch on to it. And I was with this really aggressive kid, of the most difficult kid in the whole company. I'll say very confidently, he had a lot of emotional disturbance as well. And so it was much deeper than applied behavioral analysis can really treat, in my opinion. And so I didn't work out as much, right? Because I'm too tired, or dang, I don't got enough time. And so these little justifications, as minor as it is, I'm going to take this day off from the gym. We all know the power of momentum, whether we momentum upwards or we momentum downwards, if we're going to look from a place of duality, right? And so that space is when I start to compromise and justify not doing things that actually fill my cup up, and trusting my like body, like, oh dude, you're tired. And so right now, actually, it's the opposite, in the sense where I'm in the best shape of my life. And just 2 weeks ago, I've been going to the gym very consistently, and I was tired one time, and I ended up just deciding that I'm going to go to the gym again at night. And my body was just saying, though, it's exhausted though. It's exhausted. And so my mind was just like, no, I could do this. And I pushed through. I ignored what my body was telling me. And the next day, like I couldn't, it was so hard for me to get out of bed. I was burnt out because I just kept pushing my body. And so it's interesting, but it's the same mechanism from which when I was in social services, when I ignored this sense of this feeling like, dude, I'm so exhausted. I'm lacking the meaning, and I don't trust that. And so
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to know. So, okay, so you said you just told us about 2 experiences where your body was telling you that you were burning out, and some of the ways that transpired was like in your last job when you're working with this really difficult kid. it made you miss some other important things like going to the gym, right? So you was like, no, I'm going to push through, but it meant that you had to miss some other important things, which were part of this rejuvenation that Umang's been talking about. And then in this case here, where your body was telling you you're exhausted, but you still kind of pushed through and ignored it for the sake of trying to stick to your goals. So what? How do you use that information moving forward? How do you incorporate what Umang said about getting consistent rejuvenation and rest and your experiences to make sure that moving forward you don't experience those same sorts of burnout?
Well, I think that it is really valuable to actually know what burnout feels like. So, although, I mean, I do in a way invite people to, it's good to test your limits to see where your kind of limits are and where you break. And so I think that's a very good, so you know where that threshold is. And you can actually develop more muscle around that while incorporating more self-care strategies. So one, I'm so grateful that I know what burnout feels like, for one. I know how hard it needs to push. And so for me, one of my challenges that's really big though is getting a consistent amount of sleep where, you know, I don't have the blue lighting at night. And so at night before I go to sleep, I have my airplane mode and night mode. And so I'm not getting any vibrations, any notifications until the morning when I decide to do that. So that has helped me. I'm still working through it, you know, like with I still have bouts where I can get burnt out, and meditation really helps me. You know, my box breathing, it helps me to really slow down. So just remembering when I just start reacting and I notice that I'm on edge more, even though I'm lethargic, I'm still on edge. It's an indicator for me that I'm not performing optimally. I don't cater to my clients as powerfully as I can. And so that alone, when I just notice myself getting, even on the road, I don't usually get road rage. Just that's a clear indicator for me. It's like, there's something that needs to be modified. So for me, I'm getting better at just finding these indicators when I get pissed off more, and I start rationalizing, not doing things I know to do.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. So I love the fact that you said that, you know, you still get burnout, but also that you have an appreciation of the awareness of having the burnout. So you've had the burnout, but you're sort of using that experience to your benefit, right? To expand your self-awareness. And I guess this is what this is all about, right? All three of us are coaches, and what we try to help our clients do is expand their self-awareness so that they can move forward and take responsibility for their actions and decide how they want to move forward with that expanded self-awareness. So for you to say, hey, I still experience burnout, and actually the burnout that I did experience was of benefit to me because I can learn from it, I think that's so key. So, you know, if anyone watching this is experiencing burnout or has experienced burnout or will experience burnout, just to you know, be gentle with it and see it as a good thing, that hey, this is something that I'm now aware of. Now what can I do moving forward? And we've just had some very useful tips, such as rejuvenating, getting good rest, scheduling time in to make sure that you're taking care of your body so that you don't experience it, but just also being mindful of what your burnout patterns are.
Yeah, and I want to add one thing. So this is really great discussion, and I want to also mention that we've been talking about the body, and there's a lot of energy physically that's important for people to show up the way that we want to. But there's a whole component of what drives humans, right? Which is the emotion, which is energy in motion, and that can really be like food. It's nourishment, it's nutrition, to have a sense of connection with our body, a connection with emotions that we maybe avoid normally, a place to have space to process and just do nothing. So a lot of things are, so like, for example, Gavin, when you're taking action to work out, that's a positive self-care thing. You can see it as that's going to help you be more energetic, right? But it's action oriented versus the feminine, which is the energy of reception, which is to not do things, but just sit and feel and think and rest, right? And so there are times where I feel very guilty doing that, or used to feel even more so. Even now, I feel guilty doing that because we all want to succeed. We all have a drive. But we have to have that rest stop, right? Where we can actually just feel things. And so a lot of times journaling, meditation, and really connection with others helps, where it's like, it's not about a goal, right? It's not about like, okay, I'm going to do a networking event. That's not the connection I'm talking about, right? It's just connecting as humans and feeling together, expressing emotion and listening from that emotional place. That is so nourishing that it could, and in the corporate workplace, for most people who are 9 to 5, that's looked down upon. And you don't want to talk about too many personal things, and so you talk about very surface layer things. How was your day? Oh, it was great, blah, blah. But you don't actually get to the meat of conversation that nourishes you and your soul. And so that's the other side of it, is that we could also approach it from a mindful place of what's actually happening underneath when I'm feeling that burnout, and what is actually the suffering that's being caused there. And I feel that the suffering is not feeling the emotion. Even if it's sadness, grief, pain, loneliness, if you don't feel it, then you're suffering. But if you feel it, then you allow it to integrate in, and then the body responds with the right chemicals, neurotransmitters, to actually create the opposite feeling. So whenever I've had a really good cry, which has been really tough for me as a guy, right? But when I'm now able to have that and just sit and feel, listen to music, be in my bed, like just not wanting to get up and just cry, then after that, I feel so beautiful. It's like a storm passes through and then there's silence.
I love that. And I can really dig what you're saying now about sort of the masculine and the feminine, because those polarities, the masculine is very projective, right? It's very will focused, action oriented, like you said, whereas the feminine is more receptive, right? And that involves sort of relaxing and being receptive to the emotions that are coming up, like you said, as opposed to doing something to try and have a different action to what you would normally be doing, but rather just to like relax and be receptive and observe what's going on. So I can really understand what you're saying there, the masculine and the feminine.
There's also one more thing, which is control versus surrender. So normally we want to control our life, we want to control our situation, our body, etc. But that can get really tiring. And then there's the other side of surrendering to what is, which is this energy that's bigger than us, this environment that we don't have control over. So just allowing yourself to surrender, like you're on a river going whichever way, knowing that you're going down the right path, is so healing, because then you can actually control and focus and have energy when you need to, rather than all the time.
I love it. Yeah. And we've got 4 minutes left, and I just want to get your perspective, Umar, on how do you schedule in consistent rest periods?
Yeah, so I think that's the formula that everyone has to find their own. So it's a formula versus feel thing. Again, the formula, it's like, how do you consistently schedule? That's a masculine way of approaching, which is great, which is needed. Because a lot of times you're like, it's 12 o'clock, I need to go eat, boom, right? But sometimes you may not be hungry right at 12 o'clock, but you will be hungry at 1 o'clock. So having the mindfulness to actually feel into your desire in the moment. So like when you said, I'm going to go work out, that was your mind and your masculine saying, this is the right thing, but your body was telling you otherwise. And so being able to listen to that and not make it wrong is also important. Now, you don't want to indulge too much in that, but most people, I would gather, we go in the masculine because the world is run in the feeling of masculine, especially 9-to-5 corporate jobs, right? So they're not going to focus on your self-care and healing. That's up to you and taking responsibility. So maybe we balance the two a little bit more and listen to the other side and then see what happens. You may feel guilty at first. You may feel like less productive at first, but over time, you'll be more happier, more fulfilled, and more creative.
I love that. And we're just going to, as Gavin says, tie this up with a nice little bow. And if I can get each of you to just say one piece of advice that you could give to our viewers and listeners that would help them with burnout, what would you say?
One thing I would say is create a self-care menu, right? Because when we get burnt out, it's easy to grab those bags of hot Cheetos when we're tired and we're not feeling good about ourselves. And it just further forces this perpetuating mouse wheel of feeling like shit. And so by being conscious of creating some type of mental contrasting, right? So if I start to feel really tired in my body, I'm going to do some box breathing that the Navy SEALs do, and so the menu is a way of the then. If certain circumstances happen, like for me, like I said, with driving, when I'm experiencing anger because I don't know this person, he cut me off. When that happens, I'm going to take a deep breath and actually do box breathing while I'm driving. So
Okay.
I would say create a self-care menu that you can always go back to. And yeah, that's a restaurant that will really nourish you.
I love that. I love the analogy. Thank you, Gavin. Umar, one piece of advice you could give to our listeners
Yeah,
and viewers.
I think, yeah, it's really important to just build a lot of time, whether it's one day that you're just not going to focus on anything else but yourself, or a few hours in the day at the end of the day before you go on to the rest of your evening, where you don't plan anything at all. And then maybe you go to the self-care menu and you decide what feels good to me in this moment. And it's all pre-selected as healthy or nourishing for
Mm-hmm.
you, rather than go to your unhealthy behaviors. And then that way you're building in that time for self-care exactly what you need, but it's not formulaic. It's based on in that moment what you need.
But still scheduling a time to do that. Is that what you're saying?
Right. You got to have the
Time.
structure.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Otherwise you'll feel that moment when you need to perform to go to sleep.
Gotcha. And that's again balancing the masculine and feminine, right? The masculine is very much, this is the time I'm going to do it, very will focused, but in that time you're being receptive and surrendering to whatever comes up in that moment. I love it. Cool. And my one piece of advice is just something that Gavin touched on before, which is just being self-aware, right? Just having the presence of mind to recognize when you're experiencing burnout, to listen to your body, listen to what it's telling you, and then do something about it before you experience that burnout. So get yourself a self-care menu, go to that restaurant, get the nourishment, schedule in the time during the day or during the week in which you can just surrender and just see what comes up for you in that moment, and just continue to be self-aware. And we've done really well. We've got like 20 seconds to go, but I think, we had a bit of a discussion before we started, so I think we'll wrap up there. And thank you so much to Umang for joining us. We'll leave some details in the comment section or in the captions where you can find Umang. But otherwise, if you guys dig 9 to 5 with Gavin and Mike, be sure to like,
comment,
subscribe.
And wherever you are in the world right now, good morning,
Good evening.